crack, guys? Welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be talking about reading resolutions. I know it's probably a bit late in January to be doing this, but if you didn't already know, I didn't have any internet for the whole of November and pretty much half of December at the end of 2018, and then I work retail, and Christmas there's no chance of me getting like videos filmed, so this is why we're doing it now. To start this video, I'm going to be going over the resolutions that I had for my reading in 2018, and then I'm going to go on to the ones that I have for this upcoming year. So without further ado, let's just get into them. My first resolution of 2018 was to read 90 books. I read 80. Towards the middle of 2018, I realised that I was sacrificing longer books that I really wanted to read in favour of ones that were shorter that I could get through in a much quicker space of time, because I was falling behind on my reading schedule according to Goodreads, and I was becoming obsessed with that. I hated being a book behind schedule. I hated not being on track, and I liked being at least 2 books ahead so that I had that buffer. But as the year went on, I was getting farther and farther behind, and I did not like that. So I actually changed my reading goal to 80 books instead of 90, and I managed that one. Another resolution that I had in 2018 was to read more classics. I really didn't accomplish that. I read maybe about 4 classics in 2018, and I had the idea that I would get to maybe 6, which would have been one every other month, but I didn't do that, and I'm not that upset about it. In 2018, I had the resolution to finish Harry Potter. Nailed it! I finally finished Harry Potter. I listened to the audiobook of the Half-Blood Prince around May-June time, and then in November I finished reading the entire series by reading The Deathly Hallows. That was a long-winded way of trying to say that. Irish. Why not use 7 words where one could have been perfectly sufficient? In 2018, I also wanted to read more plays. I read 1. And it also kind of doubled as a resolution, because another resolution of mine was to read something in Spanish. I have a couple of Spanish books. I have a couple of my favourite books in Spanish. I have Caraval and Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children in Spanish. But the play that I actually read was La Casa de Bernarda Alba by Federico García Lorca, which is The House of Bernarda Alba. And it was dual languages. In one side of the page it had Spanish, and the other side of the page it was in English. So I got to read a play in English, and then I was able to just like skim across to the Spanish side and be like, oh yeah, so that's how you say that. Kind of like check. In the same vein as wanting to read more in Spanish, I also wanted to read more books by Irish authors. I really did not accomplish that beyond January, when I read the Children of the Famine trilogy by Marisha Conlon McKenna. They are children's books that I kind of wanted to read again, but they were literally the only thing that I read by an Irish author that year. It was kind of a pathetic resolution, but I wanted to read Born with Teeth by Kate Mulgrew again. I actually read it on her birthday. And the same goes with The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. I always want that to be the last book that I read in the year. It's because when I first read it, it was when she passed away. I was actually reading it when my mum told me, and it was the last book that I read in 2016, and then so in 2017, around her anniversary, I did it again, and then again in 2018. I also wanted to read more Danielle Steele books, because Danielle Steele is my mom's favourite author, and I'm always constantly bringing her more and more books by her, because she just churns them out like nobody's business. So I thought that I would read alongside her, you know, like she would read it and then I would read it, but I kind of only read the 1 book by Danielle Steele in 2018. Not because I didn't want to, but because I have like so many books myself that I have to get to. My mum literally just has Danielle Steele and maybe like the odd book that she gets, but she's a lot faster at reading than I am. And the last resolution that I had for 2018 was to be more consistent with my blog. That was a fail and a half. I had 7 blog posts last year. 7. Even if I did 1 a week, I should have realistically had about 52 blog posts. No, I had 7. Like, what was my excuse? I had like no excuse. Which is one of the resolutions that I'm going to do in 2019, is to be more consistent with my blog. I think I'm almost equal with last year already, and we're over halfway through January. So you already know one resolution for 2019. The next resolution is that I want to read a minimum of 52 books. And I already touched on that from my resolution from last year, and that was because I was just sacrificing books that I wanted to read. And so with only having a minimum of 52, I can give myself time to read these books, because some of them are so long that I know that it will take me more than a week to read. And so if I read some books faster, at least I could get a buffer on that schedule so that I could read the longer books on my TBR. So that's why I've set it at a minimum of 52, and it's going to stay that way for the rest of the year. Even if I surpass it pretty quickly, then it's going to stay that way. My third resolution for 2019 is to be more selective about the books that I buy. Wishful thinking on my part, because I just walk into Waterstones and next thing I know, like, there are books in my hands.
It's a true fact.
Sometimes I'm very good and I do end up setting them back and then just leaving. But I feel like it feels wrong to walk into Waterstones and not buy anything. But because my TBR is ridiculous, I want to be more selective about the books that I'm bringing in to my room and to put onto my bookshelves, because these are double-faced, okay? You see these row of books here, and then there's an entire row behind them. Most of them are red books behind them, but then most of the ones at the front are red as well, like the entire Grisha trilogy here. I've read it. Not read both editions, but I've read the Grisha trilogy. So I want to be more selective about the books that I bring in so that my TBR is not getting ridiculously out of control, because it is. My fourth resolution is to finish the book series that I have already started. This is a problem for me, because I end up starting a series, liking the first book, saying I'm going to continue on, and then I buy the second and the third books, and then they just sit there gathering dust. That is helpful to no one, least of all me, because then I'm like looking at all these unfinished book series and I'm like, yeah, I need to get to you. 2019 is the year for finishing the book series that are already completed and that I own. I'm not going to be buying any more parts of a series unless I absolutely love it. I have the entire series of Daughter Smoke and Bone, Snow Like Ashes, the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. Those are the ones I'm talking about. The ones that I already own, I'm going to finish them. I will. It's a resolution. The next resolution I have is to not worry about reading classics. If I've learnt anything from trying to read classics in 2018 and from reading classics in general, is that my brain cannot handle them. And what I mean by that is my brain can't really get to grips with the writing style of classics. There are classics where I stumble over the verbiage and the way that sentences are constructed. And then there's also the part where I'm a former English literature student, okay? My degree is in English. As a result, my brain is constantly trying to dissect and analyze classics, to the extent where it is actually stressful reading it, because I feel like, oh my gosh, I have to like sit in a seminar and like have like so many opinions about it and what this means and what that means. And as much as I do enjoy the thought of reading a classic, sometimes they're just stressful. And so if I read only one classic in 2019, I will be happy, because I know that I will have given it my full attention instead of having to try and whiz my way through it just to get to the next book on my TBR. Does that make sense? My next resolution is to read the big books that I have on my TBR. This kind of stems from my resolution to read 52 books and to get to the book series that I haven't completed yet, because they are quite chunky books, because the longer a series goes on, the bigger the book is. Like, at the moment I'm actually listening to the audiobook of A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. That book is a brick. You could kill somebody with that book. And I had read most of it when it first came out, but then I stopped at the last 100 pages, and so I've forgotten pretty much everything that's happened in it. Then there's also Sleeping Beauties by Stephen and Owen King. It's a bit of a brick. There is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I started reading it and stopped it about halfway through. And then there's also the biography of Katharine Hepburn that I have, and I've read about halfway through and then stopped. I want to get to them this year, so one of my resolutions is get to the bigger books that are on my TBR. And the last resolution that I have for 2019 is to not worry about reading diversely. I know a lot of people want to read more diverse books that are by LGBTQ plus authors or have LGBTQ plus characters. I don't really want to have to go out of my way to do that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I am reading the book. I am giving up my time on this earth to read this book. I want to be sure that it's going to be a book that I'm going to enjoy. Yes, I say I want to read more Irish authors. That's fine, but that's because I'm Irish. It's like Haley and Bookland wanted to read more Canadian authors. I just don't want to have to worry about being diverse. What attracts me to a book is the plot, not who it is by, unless it's Leigh Bardugo, or what the characters are. That is no interest to me. But I don't want to have to think, oh, I have to read this book because it has an LGBTQ plus character or is by an LGBTQ plus author. I don't want to have to do that. I want to be able to pick up a book that I know that I'm going to want to read. I don't want to have to stress about subscribers or blog readers thinking, oh, she doesn't read diversely. Years ago, diversely meant that you read across the genres. I know for a fact that that ain't gonna happen because I like fantasy. I like science fiction. Contemporaries don't really do anything for me. They don't excite me. Whereas fantasy and science fiction do. So I don't want to have to worry about being seen to be reading diversely in 2019. If I read a book, it's because the plot intrigued me first. So there you have it, guys. Those are all my resolutions for reading in 2019. Let me know what your resolutions are. Are some of yours similar to mine? Do you have a higher reading goal? Do you have a lesser of a reading goal? Let me know in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video.